Worked remotely to take care of my stepson who injured his back, then overheard him bragging to his mom about faking his injury to make me run around like a servant. A week ago, I switched to working remotely so I could help care for my stepson who supposedly injured his back in a work accident. My stepson is 25 and has been living independently since he finished trade school 5 years ago. He's been working as an electrician and renting an apartment about an hour away from us. I've known him for 6 years and have been married to his father for 4 of those years. When I first met his father, my stepson kept his distance. His parents had finalized their divorce just 18 months earlier, and he wasn't ready to see his dad with someone new. Our first few encounters were awkward. He would respond to my questions with one-word answers and avoid making eye contact. During family dinners, he positioned himself as far away from me as possible. Once, when I offered to help him move some furniture into his first apartment after trade school, he specifically asked his father to come alone instead. Over time, we built a decent relationship, nothing extraordinary but respectful. He began to acknowledge my presence at family gatherings, occasionally asked about my job in healthcare administration, and even remembered my birthday last year with a store-bought card. That changed 3 months ago when he visited for a weekend and got into a heated argument with his father. They were in the garage looking at my husband's latest motorcycle restoration project when their voices grew louder. I remained in the kitchen, not wanting to intrude, but could hear the increasing tension. My stepson stormed out of the garage, grabbed his overnight bag, and left without saying goodbye. My husband told me later that our son had accused him of caring more about his new marriage than he ever did about his first one. He claimed his father had always prioritized his personal hobbies over family time, which ultimately drove his mother away. The main issue in my husband's previous marriage was his obsession with restoring vintage motorcycles. He spent weekends and evenings in the garage working on his projects, often missing school events and family gatherings. His ex-wife complained constantly about being neglected while raising their son mostly on her own. She wanted him to participate more in family activities, but he insisted his hobby might eventually provide extra income if he could sell the restored bikes. He would spend hundreds of dollars on parts each month, tracking down rare components for specific models from the 1960s and 70s. He belonged to 3 different motorcycle restoration clubs and attended weekend meetups twice a month. During summer months, he participated in motorcycle shows that often required overnight trips to neighboring states. Meanwhile, his ex-wife managed their son's education, medical appointments, and extracurricular activities with minimal assistance. The financial aspect became important because his ex-wife frequently overspent their budget on expensive clothes and home decor. She grew up in a wealthy family, so she was accustomed to having nice things. My husband told me she regularly borrowed money from her parents to cover expenses. Their home was filled with designer furniture, high-end appliances, and artwork that stretched their middle-class income to the breaking point. This created tension with his in-laws, who questioned why their daughter had to ask for money when she was married. On multiple occasions, her father made comments about how a real provider wouldn't leave his daughter wanting for anything. One Thanksgiving, her brother presented my husband with a book on financial management as a joke gift in front of the entire family. His motorcycle hobby became an easy target for criticism, labeled as a selfish indulgence while his wife struggled financially. Arguments about time and money became more frequent, and despite having been together since they were 19, they separated when their son turned 20. By this point, their son had already aligned himself with his mother, viewing his father's absence and hobby as the primary causes of their family problems. During the divorce proceedings, his ex-wife portrayed herself as having sacrificed career opportunities to raise their son, though she had worked part-time throughout their marriage. The divorce settlement awarded her a significant portion of their assets, including half of my husband's retirement savings. When my husband started dating me 2 years after his divorce, his lifestyle changed noticeably. He still works on motorcycles, but limits it to 1 evening a week and occasional Saturdays. He makes time for us to travel and try new restaurants. He joined a cooking class I was interested in, although he showed little aptitude for culinary arts. He attends my family events without complaint and participates in conversations with my family. I appreciate his efforts, but I understand why his son resents seeing his father become more balanced after the divorce. Following their argument 3 months ago, my stepson stopped visiting altogether. He didn't call on his father's birthday and declined our invitation to a small gathering at Thanksgiving. Then last week, we received a call about his back injury. He supposedly slipped at a job site and needed assistance while recovering. According to his story, the company doctor had ordered 2 weeks of bed rest and limited movement, making it difficult for him to prepare meals or drive himself to follow-up appointments. He planned to stay with his mother initially, but she told him she was traveling for business and wouldn't return for several weeks. His father contacted me, and despite my work deadlines for the upcoming quarterly reports, I arranged to work from home to help care for him during the day while my husband was at a shop. My husband suggested hiring a home health aide, but I insisted on helping personally. I thought spending time together might repair our relationship. For 3 days, I cooked his meals, drove him to a supposed doctor's appointment, filled prescriptions for pain medication and muscle relaxants, and rearranged my work schedule to accommodate his needs. I moved important video meetings to times when he was sleeping so I could focus on both my professional responsibilities and his care requirements. The first evening, I prepared his favorite meal, according to my husband, steak with roasted potatoes. I set up a small television in the guest room so he could watch sports while resting his back. I purchased additional pillows to help him find comfortable positions and downloaded several books to my tablet that he might enjoy during his recovery. When he complained about the firmness of our guest bed aggravating his back pain, I ordered a memory foam mattress topper with overnight delivery. Yesterday morning, I returned from picking up breakfast at a local bakery and heard him speaking loudly on the phone in his room. I paused outside his door when I heard my name mentioned. He was talking to his mother and laughing about how gullible we were. I took out my phone and began recording. He mentioned applying for new jobs but said he was milking this situation as long as possible because he deserved to be taken care of after how his father treated them. He specifically said he enjoyed watching me run around like a servant when he could do everything himself. He then described how he had practiced walking with a limp cause of the back pain when anyone was watching, but moved normally when alone. He laughed about the memory foam topper I had purchased, calling it an unexpected bonus in his plan. When his mother asked how long he intended to continue the deception, he replied, "At least a month. Why not? Dad owes us after all those years he spent in that garage while we struggled." I left the house immediately and called my husband. I forwarded the recording and explained what I'd heard. My husband closed his shop early and arrived home within 40 minutes. Together, we confronted my stepson. When questioned, he denied everything until I played the recording. After several weak excuses, he finally admitted the truth. He'd been fired from his electrician job for showing up intoxicated at a customer's home. The customer, who had small children, reported his condition to the company owner, resulting in immediate termination. He worried his father would lecture him endlessly about responsibility if he revealed the truth. Though he had enough savings to cover rent for another month, he didn't want to waste money when he could live with family. Initially, he planned to stay with his mother, but she had recently started dating someone new and wanted privacy. They fabricated the business trip story together, along with a back injury, to ensure we would take him in without questions. The detailed planning of their deception became apparent. He had researched common back injury symptoms online to make his performance convincing. The doctor's appointment I drove him to was actually a meeting with a friend who worked in medical billing and had helped him obtain a back brace and legitimate-looking medical documents. The prescription I filled had been written by a doctor his mother knew socially, who agreed to prescribe mild pain relievers without an actual examination as a favor. Which I know is completely illegal BTW. My husband expressed disappointment but said if his son had been honest about losing his job, we would have helped him anyway. He might have offered temporary work at his shop while his son looked for another position in his field. However, the calculated deception, especially making me adjust my work schedule unnecessarily, crossed a line. My husband told him he needed to leave our home by the following day. My stepson became defensive and blamed me for ruining his relationship with his father. He claimed I had changed his father and made him choose his new family over his real one. He brought up Christmas 2 years ago when my husband attended my family gathering instead of the event at his ex-wife's home, describing it as evidence of my husband's shifted priorities. He stated that his father had become soft since marrying me, abandoning the dedication to motorcycles that had once defined him. That comment, after all I had done to help him, pushed me beyond my limits. I told him that he and his mother were both manipulative and entitled. I pointed out that while his mother might not care about my husband anymore, a son should still respect his father. I said they were both freeloaders who only valued my husband for what they could get from him. I mentioned that his mother had spent years complaining about my husband's hobby, yet now they criticized him for reducing time spent on it. I brought up specific instances when my husband had financially supported him after trade school, including helping with the security deposit for his apartment and purchasing specialized tools for his work. In the heat of the moment, I stated that as long as I remained in his father's life, I would ensure he never took advantage of my husband again, even if that meant encouraging his father to remove him completely from our lives. My stepson went silent, closed his bedroom door, and didn't emerge for the remainder of the evening. When we woke the next morning, he had already left, taking all his belongings. The guest room was cleaned, with the linen stripped from the bed and folded neatly at the foot. The memory foam topper had been removed from the mattress and placed in its original packaging. He left his house key on the kitchen counter with a note that simply said, "Thanks for letting me stay." We assumed the matter was resolved until his mother began bombarding us with texts and calls. She demanded I apologize for speaking to her son that way, insisting I had no right to involve myself in family matters since I wasn't really family. She called my husband's shop repeatedly, forcing him to instruct his employees to screen calls. She sent emails with lengthy explanations of why her son's behavior was justified given his father's past failures. We blocked her number, but she continued contacting us through other family members and even showed up at my husband's shop. During her visit to the shop, she knocked over a display and demanded to speak with my husband in front of customers. His employee called the police when she refused to leave, though she departed before they arrived. She left a handwritten letter on his car that detailed all the ways he had failed as a father and husband, concluding with a threat to make him pay for allowing me to speak to her son disrespectfully. My husband acknowledges I spoke harshly but believes his son's actions warranted a strong response. However, he's concerned about my statement regarding cutting his son from our lives, as it seemed controlling and overstepped boundaries. While I stand by most of what I said, I recognize that particular comment went too far. So, Ida for telling my stepson I'd make sure his father cut him from his life? Update 1. Thank you to everyone who commented on my post. I want to clarify something important. Parents naturally feel protective of their children regardless of their behavior. My husband's mixed feelings about my confrontation with his son are understandable. If I were in his position, I would likely feel conflicted as well. This situation isn't my husband versus me, we're both processing how we handled the confrontation with his son. Please refrain from criticizing my husband in the comments. He bears no responsibility for this situation. After 2 days of reflection, my husband and I discussed the entire incident. I acknowledged that my statement about cutting his son from his life was excessive, but maintained that I wouldn't apologize given the circumstances. My husband agreed that no apology was necessary. He believes his son owes both of us an apology, especially considering I rearranged my work schedule specifically to care for him. My husband confirmed the accuracy of my observations about his son's behavior resembling his mother's entitled attitude. He worried about this pattern for years but permitted it because of his love for his son. During our conversation, my husband became visibly upset when describing his efforts to raise a responsible adult while his ex-wife undermined those lessons. He mentioned feeling responsible for the current situation because his absence during his son's teenage years may have contributed to these behavioral issues. If he had balanced hobby and family better, perhaps his son would have developed different values. He recounted how his son had once been interested in motorcycles too, joining him in the garage on rare occasions to learn basic maintenance. At age 15, his son asked for a small motorcycle of his own, but his mother immediately objected, citing safety concerns. Instead of supporting his interest, she enrolled him in tennis lessons and debate club, activities that kept him away from the garage on weekends. When his father missed tournaments due to motorcycle shows, it reinforced the narrative that his hobby took importance over his son's achievements. I reassured my husband that he wasn't solely responsible. He worked long hours at his regular job as a mechanical engineer before starting his own motorcycle repair business, and his hobby provided necessary stress relief. He maintained their financial obligations and contributed to their son's college fund consistently. He worked on motorcycles partly because it allowed him to stay home rather than going out with coworkers or friends. His ex-wife refused to adjust her spending habits despite their financial limitations. She redecorated their living room annually, purchased new vehicles every 2 years, and insisted on expensive vacations that required months of saving. Despite their comfortable middle-class income, she demanded luxury items and experiences that stretched their budget. When my husband suggested more affordable alternatives, she accused him of limiting her lifestyle. His in-laws regularly made comments about his inability to provide the lifestyle their daughter expected. During family gatherings, they pointed out the contrast between their daughter's childhood home and her married living situation. Rather than adapting to financial reality, his ex-wife borrowed money from her parents, creating further tension. The loans were never formalized, allowing her parents to mention them repeatedly as evidence of my husband's inadequacy. My husband worked additional hours to reduce their dependence on her family, which unfortunately reduced his time at home. I pointed out that even now, with their son fully grown, his ex-wife had an opportunity to guide him toward honesty and responsibility. Instead, she participated in his deception. My husband's son needs guidance, but his mother reinforces problematic behavior. Eventually, he will need to recognize his mother doesn't prioritize his best interests but uses him as a weapon against his father. My husband mentioned that during the divorce proceedings, his ex-wife frequently changed visitation schedules last minute, citing their son's academic or extracurricular commitments. When he attempted to attend school functions independently, he often discovered the events had been rescheduled or canceled without his knowledge. His ex-wife controlled the flow of information about their son's activities, effectively limiting his participation in their son's life while simultaneously criticizing his absence. We decided to ignore further communications from his ex-wife, as engaging with her accusations would only prolong the conflict. Whether his son chooses to apologize and rebuild their relationship or continue following his mother's influence remains his decision. Update 2. 3 weeks have passed since my last update. 4 days after posting it, my husband's ex-wife appeared unannounced at our front door at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday. When I answered, she demanded to know why we were ignoring her messages. I informed her neither my husband nor I wished to speak with her, but she pushed past me into our entryway and began shouting for my husband. Her behavior prompted an immediate response from me. I told her she had no right to force her way into our home. She countered that this matter involved her family and declared I had no place in the discussion, just as I had no right to speak to her son as I did. She referred to me as the second wife rather than using my name and suggested I should know my place in the hierarchy of my husband's relationships. Before my husband reached the front of the house, I informed her that while this was once her home and family, I became part of this family when I married her ex-husband. I reminded her that I was the one who cared for her son while he pretended to be injured, which earned me the right to address his behavior. I pointed out that I had prepared meals, rearranged furniture to accommodate his supposed needs, and modified my work schedule, all for someone who was actively deceiving me with her cooperation. My husband interrupted our exchange and firmly instructed her to leave, stating he had nothing to discuss with her. She became increasingly agitated, insisting he was being unreasonable and should prioritize his son over me. She brought up specific instances from their marriage when he had chosen motorcycle events over family obligations, suggesting his current behavior proved he had never valued family connections. When he remained silent, she eventually ran out of arguments and began using profanity before departing. As she left, she threatened to ensure my husband never saw his son again. Her parting threat confirmed my earlier assessment. She viewed her son primarily as leverage against my husband rather than as an individual with his own needs. We decided to contact my stepson directly to share what his mother had said, explaining that she was using him as a weapon in her ongoing resentment toward his father. My husband also wrote a lengthy message describing his perspective on their family history. He detailed his financial struggles during the marriage, his ex-wife's unreasonable expectations, and acknowledged his own shortcomings, particularly his absence from family activities. He explained why his son might feel closer to his mother and distant from him, but pointed out that a parent who truly prioritized their child's well-being wouldn't encourage dishonesty and manipulation. He described specific memories he valued from his son's childhood, teaching him to ride a bicycle, building a treehouse together one summer, attending his high school graduation. He mentioned keeping photos of these events in his shop office and looking at them regularly. He expressed his love for his son despite everything that had happened. My husband noted that he had always supported his son financially and emotionally when asked directly, including helping him apply to trade school and purchase his first professional toolkit. He expressed regret for not being more present during his son's formative years but emphasized that his current desire to rebuild their relationship was genuine. He concluded by saying he would respect whatever decision his son made regarding future contact but hoped for reconciliation. We received no response for nearly 2 weeks. Yesterday, my stepson finally replied. He apologized for his behavior, admitting he had acted childishly. He explained that despite being an adult when his parents divorced, the separation affected him deeply. Seeing his father change his habits for a new relationship when he hadn't done so for his mother created resentment. The comparative ease of his father's second marriage made him question whether his father had ever truly tried in his first. He acknowledged that his mother's guidance had been misguided and revealed they had been arguing frequently over this situation. She insisted he maintain distance from his father while I remained in the picture, characterizing any reconciliation as disloyalty to her. After reading his father's message, he felt genuine remorse and requested another chance. He mentioned securing a job interview with another electrical contractor and wanted to share that news with his father in person. We invited him for dinner this weekend to discuss everything face to face. Update 3. The dinner with my stepson exceeded our expectations. He arrived punctually with flowers and a gift basket containing local specialty foods, which seemed excessive but demonstrated his sincerity. Upon entering our home, he immediately began apologizing to both of us. He hugged his father for several minutes, repeatedly expressing regret for his actions. He then described the aftermath of our confrontation. Contrary to our assumptions, he hadn't been staying with his mother these past weeks. She had explicitly told him she was living with her new boyfriend and didn't want him interfering with their privacy. Her claims about business travel had been fabricated entirely to facilitate his deception. Instead, he had been sleeping on a friend's couch while job hunting and maintaining occasional phone contact with his mother. My harsh words had affected him profoundly, not because they were cruel but because they were accurate. He admitted my assessment of the situation had forced him to reconsider his behavior and his mother's influence. When he contemplated apologizing to us, his mother strongly objected, which sparked multiple arguments. After receiving his father's message explaining the family history from his perspective, he decided to evaluate his relationship with his mother critically for the first time. He told that throughout his parents' divorce, his mother consistently portrayed his father negatively, describing him as selfish and emotionally unavailable. She referenced his motorcycle hobby as evidence of his character flaws, suggesting he valued inanimate objects over family relationships. This characterization colored his perception during his formative years, creating a narrative where his father was solely responsible for their family's end. When I began dating his father, his mother intensified her criticism, suggesting his father had never valued family life and likely pursued other relationships before their separation. She implied my husband's willingness to adjust his schedule for me proved he had been capable of being present all along but had chosen not to be for them. Given his already distant relationship with his father due to work commitments and hobby pursuits, these accusations seemed believable. His mother exploited this distance to further alienate them. My stepson has decided to limit contact with his mother while he works on rebuilding his relationship with his father. He mentioned that her new boyfriend appears controlling and frequently makes decisions that affect her without consultation, ironically mirroring the behavior she accused my husband of during their marriage. He secured a job interview with another electrical contractor and plans to move forward independently. After dinner, he asked to see his father's current motorcycle project. They spent over an hour in the garage discussing restoration techniques, suggesting the possibility of shared interests moving forward. I've accepted his apology without reservation. At 25, he's still finding his way, and the complexities of family loyalty clouded his judgment. Everyone makes mistakes, especially during turbulent periods. The important thing is his willingness to acknowledge his actions and make amends. My husband appears genuinely relieved to have this opportunity to reconnect with his son, and I'm optimistic about our future as a family. Last weekend, my stepson joined us for a local motorcycle show where my husband was exhibiting his recently completed restoration. It marked the first public event they had attended together in years, and watching them discuss technical details with other enthusiasts suggested a foundation for rebuilding their relationship. We've planned a monthly dinner moving forward, creating regular opportunities for communication without pressure, and for the first time since I've known them, their conversation flowed naturally without underlying tension.